Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Combating Cancer. My name is Gwen Kelly, and I'm your host. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. A little bit about me. I was diagnosed with stage 3 astrocytoma brain cancer at 19. I created this platform to be a safe space for anyone impacted by cancer, whether you're in active treatment, in remission, or grieving the loss of a loved one. Cancer is a terrible disease, and no one should have to go through it alone. Today, I'm really excited to welcome a very special guest, Dave McKeag. Dave was actually my middle school principal, which makes having him on the show incredibly meaningful to me. He's also a pancreatic cancer survivor. And if you know anything about pancreatic cancer, you know it's a diagnosis that often stops people in their tracks. I am so grateful to have Dave here today to share his story, talk about his life before cancer, everything in between, and help raise awareness for those who may be navigating a similar journey. Dave, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Awesome. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and share my story and see how we might be able to help some others.
Yeah, so let's start with your life before the diagnosis. What did that chapter look like for you?
I was diagnosed with an adenocarcinoma, the head of my pancreas, in October of 2021. was looking at my 21st year of being the principal at Valley Middle School of STEM. My wife, Kathy's also an educator. She's an English teacher at another middle school in the district. We have 4 boys. They were grown, looking to start their own families, contemplating how I was going to retire and running the schools post-pandemic. It was pretty stressful, and we were kind of coming out of it. And then one day I wake up and my eyes are yellow. I'm not feeling real good. And I knew there was something wrong. So prior to that, I was, like I said, middle school principal. I was a high school and college athlete. I had just kind of reignited my fitness journey at a local CrossFit gym a couple years prior to being diagnosed, which proved to be a real benefit for me because I was now in tune with my body and how it felt. The alarm bells started to go off. When the jaundice started to pop up in my eyes, I wasn't feeling it. Had heartburn. And so I went to the doctor. And then through a series of tests. At first, they thought it was liver, then it was something else. And then an MRI said I had a mass on my pancreas, and then an endoscopy and biopsy confirmed it was an adenocarcinoma. That was October 7th of 2021 when I was officially diagnosed. And I started chemo on October 25th. So we got at it right away. Prior to that, like I said, my wife and I had been married for a long time, both educators, grown kids. Life was supposed to be kind of looking towards retirement and kind of see what was next to the chapter. And all of a sudden, you get this curveball to swing at.
And during that time when you were going in and out of doctor's appointments, not knowing what was going on or whether it was cancer, I imagine that had to be incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, well, it's frustrating. The one thing that like I said, I have a lot of blessings to share. And one of them was my wife, Kathy. Kathy is not one to take a back seat to things. So we pushed pretty hard to get in and get tested. The first blood test showed my bilirubin was off the charts. They said, oh, you might have a liver problem. So we get right in and got a liver ultrasound. They said, oh, there's something going on. They thought it was fatty liver disease. Then I got right in and saw a liver specialist. They said, no, your liver's fine. There's something else. So it was, frustration. If you sit and wait for things to happen, you're going to be frustrated. We've kind of lived our life as choosing not to be victims, that we are under control and we have responsibility for the things that happen to us, even if we don't want them to happen to us. And at that point, you take the bull by the horns and you get after it. So we're able to very quickly, like it was the end of September, actually, where I was not feeling well. And within a month, I was diagnosed. I had the biopsy, I had a stent. The tumor was in the head of my pancreas. And fortunately for me, the tumor actually grew into the bile duct that goes from the gallbladder into your duodenum and blocked off the bile duct. If it had not done that, if it had grown somewhere else, it might have sat there for quite a long time. The problem with pancreatic cancer is they often catch it very late when there is not much that can be done. Mine was caught pretty early. As it turns out, the tumor was still contained inside the pancreas. There was no metastasis that they had found. So I was able to get a stent put in my bile duct, which allowed the bile to flow again. And the thing is, if you start itching and you go yellow, you got to get in right away because what's happened, your bilirubin count has gone up and it causes you to itch bad. Itching was pretty terrible. So once they kind of got that figured out and the bile duct flowing again, and then we quickly got into see an oncologist. So we started with M Health system, found an oncologist, found a course of chemo, and then started in October and started getting after it. And with the type of pancreatic cancer that I have, They don't operate, then do chemo. They actually do chemo. And then I actually had radiation because I transferred at one point to Mayo. Then I had surgery. Once again, we're not going to take the victim role. We're going to control what we control. And that's our attitude, our effort, and our preparation. And one of the fortunate things that I had is I had a long career as a principal in District 196. I was a guy that never took a sick day. I did see the doctor once. I had my yearly physicals. I had plenty of sick leave and vacation time. And I, at that point, decided that combating cancer, fighting the cancer, was going to become a full-time job. Was able to step away. I had a great team at my school that leveled up and took over for me. And then I could really focus on getting better and my treatment and dealing with chemo and all that other stuff.
It's one of those things with cancer. The second those words come out of a doctor's mouth, it's go time. You're in the fight. It doesn't matter what stage it is or what the statistics say. You fight no matter what.
Yeah, kind of a funny story, Gwen. Once they told me what I had, is I never went and Googled survival rates, or no one ever told me. For me, it didn't really matter what the statistics said, because it was clear this is something that needs to get cured, and we're going to get after it. About 2 months ago, I was in the car listening to the radio, and they were talking about a pancreatic cancer vaccine and how successful it has been. And they mentioned that people with pancreatic cancer, 90% of them don't make it very long. I'm like, dang. It's probably a good thing I didn't know that. So I mentioned it to my wife, and I said, hey, do you know that 90% of the people don't make it through pancreatic cancer? She said, yeah, knucklehead. I looked it up. You didn't. That's why I was so worried.
That's the same thing that happened with my family. As for brain cancer, it's similar statistics. And I remember I was like, I'm not looking this thing up, because I know if it's in your head, it's bad. It's bad.
Yeah.
Everyone else did in my life. I'm like, don't tell me. I don't want to know.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those deals. Don't tell me the odds, because they don't matter to me right now, because I'm going to get after this thing like it can be cured. In talking to the people at Mayo, after surgery and treatment, and, we sit down with a oncologist and say, hey, okay, you tell me, what do I need to do to keep this away? Tell me the diet, I'll follow it, exercise, sleep, what? And they said, the number one thing that we have found is your attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And if your attitude is a positive and good one, those are the people that seem to do best at keeping cancer away and battling after all the treatments are done. So, I think that's the kind of the lesson for people. Number one is you get to go to the dark place. Absolutely. You can't stay there. You got to get out of that, and you got to get back on your front wheels. I think there's always something that can be tried. There's always something to look to going forward. And then it's lean on the people around you. Get some help. I have a great support network. I had people at school that were checking in on me. So build yourself some hope and positivity in the day. Like, my goal during chemo was to make cancer as small a part of my day as I could. I still went to the gym. I found hobbies. I read. I just didn't sit around the house and feel, why did this happen to me?
I really love that mindset, because it's the exact same one I had when I was diagnosed. Before that, all I ever heard were stories about people with cancer being incredibly sick, stuck in bed all day. That was really my only reference point. So I assumed that once you got cancer, that's what your life became. I remember sitting in the doctor's office with my dad and thinking, I'm not going to let this take over my life. I told myself I was going to be the outlier, the person who still got up, went to the gym every day, and did what needed to be done. I didn't want cancer to be my life. I wanted it to be a small part of my day, not the whole thing. And that's something you touched on as well, how staying physically active and prioritizing your fitness played a huge role in helping you through your own journey.
Well, still remember the first chemo session I had. The oncology pharmacist came in, and we were talking, and I said I worked out, and he said, I'm going to tell you this right now. He said, you've got to keep going to the gym. And on those days you don't feel like going is when you should go. So at that point I said, you know what, I'm going to do that. And even if I just walk into the gym and sit down and suck up the energy of a class or talk to people or whatever, that's what I'm going to do. And I think that was an important part of, my journey through cancer, which is it's important you take care of what you need to. Follow the treatment like they tell you. They're professionals. They know what they're doing. And they're out to help you. Work hard not to be the victim. And if you do go to the dark place in your head, try to get yourself out of there as fast as possible and back on your front wheels. Even if, I thought to myself, well, what if it does come back? And they say, basically all we're able to do now is try to prolong your life as long as possible. Okay, it looks like it's going to be terminal. Well, I still have the opportunity at that point to say, well, then I'm going to make the most out of what I have left. I'm going to be a model for how to be a terminal cancer guy.
I mean, I love that.
I came across this saying. I think it was on like a t-shirt somewhere. But what the saying was, I don't know how my story ends, but it will never include I gave up. Everybody's cancer journey is different. We lost my dad at the age of 64 to multiple myeloma. We fought it for 3 years, and his journey was different than mine. I did learn some things from his journey. He's an old Iowa farm kid, and if you still have breath, you still have fight, and that's what he did. He still went to work. He still fought it. Multiple myeloma is tough because it's one that is not a great cure rate. I also didn't want to be distracted from my cancer fight either. And I think at one point he was at work and fell and broke his hip, and they had, do a hip replacement. And that's kind of when things started to go downhill for him. I think we can all learn lessons from it. But I mean, as hard as it is and hard as the news is, you have to try to find the hope and the resilience there to push on to the next moment. Even if you just have the next moment, live for that next moment.
100%. And honestly, what you're saying really resonates with me. As someone who's been through this too, it can feel like this invisible death sentence is suddenly hanging over your head, where you're told, we'll just keep monitoring your scans, and if something shows up, we repeat the process. That's such a hard place to live in because you want so badly to be the person who hears, you're in remission, everything looks good, you don't have to worry about this anymore. And when that's not your reality, it can bring up a lot of complicated emotions. I'm curious, did you ever experience a sense of jealousy toward other cancer diagnosis or toward people who seem to have clearer endpoints or more definitive answers?
My brother-in-law's son is Casey O'Brien, and Casey is famous around Minnesota. He was the one that had osteosarcoma as a 9th grader, became a holder at the University of Minnesota, has raised over $1 million for the Masonic Children's Hospital, and still continues to battle cancer, even as we're talking right now. Everybody's journey is personal. So if I looked at somebody and said, golly, why can't it be like that? I'm like, well, it's not like that. And then the whole question, well, why did this happen to me? My next thought was, well, why not me? I'm not special.
Yep.
There's probably, I don't have there's no genetic markers or predisposition in my DNA to say I should get cancer. In fact, we have longevity all over my family. My grandparents lived well into their 90s. There's very little cancer. There's very little heart disease. We're really pretty healthy people. So there's why me? Well, why not me? I was part of the unlucky 2 or 3% that ended up with pancreatic cancer. I mean, some people will look at their cancer journey as kind of a holy war. They're battling the enemy. And if that's what fuels their passion and fire, I'm all for that. But for me, it was like, no, this is something that I have this illness that developed that tumor is me. It's not somebody else. So it's my job to respond the way that makes sense to me. And I'm not going to be a victim. I'm not going to see it as a battle of good versus evil. It's just something that happens that we got to take care of. And I'm going to put my full effort and thought behind it in order to get better, because I got a lot left to live for. I control what I could control. It's a kind of a stoic notion that you control your attitude, your effort, and your preparation. That's it. I can't control the disease. I can't control my doctors. I can't control the progress of the disease. And hell, I could have stepped off a curb at school and got hit by a car and been done, the very next day after being diagnosed. So to me, the idea of kind of this notion of radical acceptance, yes, this is what I have. This is what I've got now. Where are we going to go from here? What's the plan? How can I get on my front wheels? And how can I deal with this? And in the process, show others, my family, my kids, how to live through something traumatic and negative like a cancer diagnosis and still thrive. I think there's a purpose and a mission that I felt in this whole thing that I think that actually really helped fuel my journey as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Unfortunately, almost everyone is going to be touched by cancer in some way. Either they'll experience it themselves or someone they love. And it's not always helpful to ask, why them? Why me? Why is this happening? Sometimes the reality is just that life can really be unfair. Terrible things happen. What it really comes down to is how you respond. There's only so much you can control. And most of the time, the only thing you truly have control over are your attitude and your reactions. And especially during a cancer journey, how you respond to what's happening around you is everything. It doesn't help to play the comparison game, looking at how someone else handled their diagnosis, their emotions, or their outcome and thinking, should I feel this way too? You have to find the thing that fuels you and keep moving forward with it. And when that fuel runs out, you don't quit, you find a new tank, refill it, and keep going.
So we talked about a little bit before we started recording that you actually got the Whipple surgery, which I only know that name from Grey's Anatomy.
What they told me at the time is it's as complicated as a liver transplant. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's a pretty big deal. There's a mass on your pancreas. Well, I hope it's benign. I'd read a little bit and said, well, a Whipple surgery is generally indicated. I'm like, oh boy, that's a lot. I've got things to do. I mean, I'm kind of a big deal. But the Whipple surgery involves them going in, starting the incision that right below your chest, going all the way around your belly button and open you up, and they remove your gallbladder, the head of your pancreas, kind of a bottom portion of your stomach, and your duodenum, the portion of that small intestine that's right after the stomach. And in my case, they also took 47 or 48 lymph nodes in the area as well. So they take all that stuff out, and they take your small intestine, and they sew in your stomach, and they sew in the duct from your liver that transports the bile into your digestive system. But in my case, I had a really great doctor at Mayo who he's well known for these surgeries. They also put in a tube that will bypass your stomach in case you need to have a feeding tube, which in my case proved to be a pretty good thing. It was about a 7-hour surgery. They sew you back up and they send you back to the room to recover, kind of teach yourself how to eat again. In my case, unfortunately, I ended up developing a bleed internally that caused a blood clot to close off my new digestive system. So I went for about a week and a half to 2 weeks without a lot of water and without a lot of food. When I was diagnosed, I was probably about 280 to 275 pounds. At one point, I had lost weight. I was 207.
Wow.
And by the way, not a weight loss program I would recommend. Ended up back in the hospital a couple of times, back at Mayo with complications. At one point, they had put me just below ICU stage, where they had to give me some blood and just kind of let things settle and let that blood clot dissipate so everything would function again. It is interesting, July of 2022 is when I had the surgery. So I had chemo into April of 2022. I had radiation for a month. And then my oldest son got married in June. And then in July, I had this surgery. And then I had agreed to officiate a wedding for a couple at the gym in September. So when I got done with the summer, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to figure out how I can stand on my feet for at least half an hour, be a pastor-like guy. Once they said, yep, you can go back to working out, I think some of my earliest workouts were lifting an empty bar and then 15-minute walks, slow walks on the treadmill, just to build up my stamina. And I ended up in September officiating that wedding. I was happy for that. I eventually got all the tubes and drains pulled out. They did start me on a feeding tube. So I started with some nutrition through a tube that bypassed my stomach. That really helped in the healing process. As much of a pain in the neck as it was to keep it up and running tubes and drains and all that kind of stuff, it was pretty important for me. It was part of my recovery. After that fall of 2022, got back in the gym, started working out, started continuing to be active, and steadily recovered my strength and fitness. I had retired in the fall of 2022. And then in the spring of 2023, I was hired back to run our district's LC for 5 weeks. So I was able to be a principal one more time. And at the end of it, I said, I can do the job, but I no longer want to. So and I kind of retired, really retired. And now I'm coaching CrossFit classes at the gym. I'm a level 2 certified CrossFit coach. Now I'm also coaching football at Lakeville South in the fall and coaching track at the New Prague High School as well.
You are booked and busy.
You got to keep rolling.
Got to keep rolling. I think that's just awesome. Just the fact that you're able to still persevere through this entire journey. I know that you and I had talked about that you originally had to go in for 90-day scans afterwards when surgery was done and everything. How was that process for you? Did you have the normal anxiety, is what I like to call it, the anxiety before the scans, where you were just terrible to everyone around you?
I have this wonderful wife, Kathy. The nice thing about her, she's very supportive, but she also doesn't put up with any nonsense. I didn't get to be cranky with anybody because I had a cancer that didn't metastasize. It looks like, with the right outlook and the right direction, it maybe wouldn't come back. But you do get a little anxious. You do get that scanxiety. And then you go have your scans and your blood tests, and then you wait, and then the patient portal might be the best and worst thing ever. So you pull it up and you're like, okay, what the hell does that mean? What is that language? Why can't they do it in normal language? Then you go meet with the oncologist. They say, yeah, you're good. Don't worry about, we're fine. So every 3 months for 2 years, that was kind of the process. The one thing they did tell me that I think is really, really something to remember is the best indicator is how you feel. I mean, if you feel good, if things are functioning and you're doing the things you need to do and you have energy, chances are it's not coming back. As we approach the scan time, you think, oh, my back hurts. What does that mean? Or I've got a cough. What does that mean? Because the pancreas cancer, they say, might show back up as lung cancer. You go through the anxiety, and it's good to have people around you to share that, I'm feeling anxious. I'm worried about this. And I did have kind of a scare because ahead of one of my scans, I was starting to get itchy. I'm like, oh boy, this feels like it's returned. So we went in and my bilirubin count was up and like, oh cripes, now what does that mean? What can happen is things can get clogged. So your bile duct, even though they sew everything back together, sometimes it can be clogged. And when it clogs, it backs up through your liver, your bilirubin goes up, all the liver enzymes go up and all that kind of stuff. So it was nice for the oncologist to be able to say, hey, first of all, the cancer hasn't returned, but we do have to go back in and do an endoscopy to kind of clean out the bile duct and make sure things are flowing the way they should, because that's what's causing you the trouble. Even during chemo, I had a couple of visits in the hospital where I had an infection around that bile duct area just because of its bacteria and digestion, and they were worried about sepsis. But since that time, however, I haven't had any trouble at all. Every 3 months, you get the scans, you kind of go through it. And then at 2 years, I graduated to scans every 6 months. Kathy wasn't happy with that. She would much rather have me scanned every 3 months. But according to Mayo, if you make it to 2 years, the chances of the cancer returning drops considerably. Once you get to 5 years, they consider you more or less cured or graduated and then you just go in if you feel like you have got symptoms. The important thing is take somebody. I mean, we have a process for our scans, even though we drive down about an hour and a half down to Mayo. And you do all the tests on one day and then you go back the next day. They used to be able to put them together where you get the scans in the morning and the meeting in the afternoon, which we really liked. They don't do that way anymore, which is fine. But Kathy and I go down twice. We go down for the scans and we go down for the visit. And even though I've said, hey, Kathy, I can go do the scans and the blood tests on my own. It's not a big deal. She said, nope, that's not how we do things.
They do not care.
You do not care. And so I think having that kind of a routine, having that support network around you when you're anxious, there's somebody there to kind of hold your hand and talk through things. And I remember sometimes we've said to ourselves, well, if it's returned, it doesn't mean I'm gone tomorrow. There's still gas in the tank, like you say. So let's figure out what's next. But fortunately, so far, my oncologist comes in and they smile at me, which is really a good sign.
Oh, that's so awesome. And it's just so great to hear that even after this diagnosis that you're still so positive and you're finally returning back to this normal life, although it'll never be as normal as it was before you were diagnosed. But
no, I'm never going to say, you hear some people, well, cancer is the best thing that happened to me. I'm not that guy. I could have done just fine without cancer. I didn't need it in my life to turn me around or anything like that. But after having it, I think there is, for me, an opportunity to show people how to deal with it and how to stay vital and thrive after it's all done. We need to talk more about that because you hear about people getting pancreatic cancer and not making it. You don't hear a lot about the people who got pancreatic cancer and made it, and they're out there. If we can make more of those stories and less of the, oh my God, dead man walking kind of stories, I think we'd be better off.
And there'll be a lot less of the fear and the worries of it because, if you hear the positive stories, you're like, I can be that. When you're so surrounded around all the negative stories, it's very hard to stay positive.
Yeah, it takes some discipline for sure.
So before we leave, I just want to know if you have any final thoughts or advice that you'd want to give to anyone, either going through a pancreatic journey of their own or just a cancer journey.
Yeah, I would. You first of all, find your helpers, find your support network. Yeah, they're out there. Hopefully everybody has somebody in their life that they can lean on who will maybe just sit with you. When I had chemo, it was kind of the tail end of the pandemic. They let my wife come in at the beginning, let Kathy come in for the first treatment. And after that, she couldn't be around. But if you have people who can go with you, give you rides, who can sit with you, talk with you, I think to me, that's the first one. Find your support network and leverage that support network. The second thing would be, how can you make cancer the smallest part of your day? So you're not consumed by the worries and concerns. Find yourself a hobby. Find something that you can, even if it's to distract your mind for a while. I found going to the gym and helping out at the gym, finding a way to serve others so you're not so me-centered all the time is a real powerful source of healing as well. And then listen to your doctors. Use the medication. They do know what they're doing. They do know what they're talking about. Just communicate and refuse to be a victim.
Yeah, I love that. I continue to wish you all the best. And, I need you to go
Same
over to my
here.
parents' house so I can get that good banana dessert because they don't make it unless you're coming.
All right. I'll get that on the agenda soon.
Well, once again, I just want to thank you so much for coming on today. Your story is truly inspiring, and I'm so grateful we were able to have this conversation. Moments like these are such an important reminder that even in the darkness that surrounds cancer, there is hope. That brings us to the end of today's episode of Combating Cancer. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who may need to hear it. And as always, my door is open. If you or someone you know would like to come on and share your story, or if you have a sponsorship inquiry that aligns with this mission, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you all next Wednesday.